We're being joined on the line right now by Representative Michael Waltz, Republican from Florida. Congressman Waltz, good to have you back on.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And almost Happy New Year. I think most of us are going to stay up till, I think most of us are going to stay up till 12:01 for sure, just to make sure it's gone.
The bottom doesn't fall out. Tired big sinkhole. No, it's been that type of year, and it's been absolutely rough. And it's been a year in which the election at certain times, at least the general election, was like the number 2 or number 3 story in the country. But all eyes are on Georgia, Congressman. The president is planning a huge rally on the 4th, and we're 6 days out. What's your gut feeling about the race?
Well, it's going to come down to Election Day turnout on the Republican side. I think the Democrats are somewhat encouraged by what they're seeing in vote by mail and early voting. At the end of the day, our Republican voters, they've got to show. You and I've talked before that I see every day in the House of Representatives led by Nancy Pelosi, who is completely controlled by the progressives and the squad. At this point, particularly now when she needs their votes to get speaker, the seats that we took back from them this past election were actually most of their moderate seats. So they even have fewer than they already had, and gives the progressives even a bigger voice. And the first thing she's going to do it's not going to be sanctuary cities or defunding the police or their progressive agenda. It's going to be to lock down power and make sure the Republicans can't take it back again. And that is going to be, a lot of the things that you've been talking about and others in terms of rigging the system, in terms of votes. She'll make it into national law. She wants to drop the voting age to 16. She wants to make automatic registration. She essentially wants to force the entire country. No voter IDs. No states will be allowed to ask for voter ID. She wants to make the entire country vote like California and New York. And then on the Senate side, it'll be stacking the Supreme Court so they can't overturn these laws, adding D.C. into statehood so they get 2 more senators, and just make the mountain phenomenally steep to climb for Republicans to ever come back. And then they'll start with their progressive agenda. And that's what everybody's got to understand. I've seen her operate up close. At things like taking "In God We Trust" out of, when you swear into a committee, they take God out of the oath, and just chipping away at our values in the America as we know it. So everything's at stake, and we got to show on voter day. And I'm thrilled the president's coming down to get everybody fired up to come out and vote.
You're absolutely right. And just listening to you, I mean, the backdrop of all of this is summed up in the first sentence of this Axios report, which the headline is "How China Won 2020. That first sentence, Congressman, is China will end this year as the only major country in the world to see its economy grow rather than shrink. Like everything that you just said, if Senators Loeffler and Perdue do not keep these seats, all of those horrific things will happen. But at the end of the day, this Nazi regime, this Communist Party of China, they will continue to enact their 100-year plan, and they will, in all likelihood, have a Joe Biden who has helped them for decades in government see their goal of taking over the world. We have to keep Mitch McConnell as the majority leader, because we need the backstop to stop both the Democrats and the Communist Party of China.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because what we're facing next Tuesday, and January 5th, could set the stage for an America, our children and grandchildren growing up in America led by socialists and a world led by Chinese communists. Yeah. And that is not overstating the case at all, because if the Democrats and the progressives control the White House and all of Congress, they will dismantle the president's stand and legacy on China, whether it is stopping their IP theft, whether it's stopping the massive amount of money that's flowing in to influence our politicians and media, think tanks and universities. And they've already called for massive cuts to our defense budget, just as we've been rebuilding the military and shifting it to deal with the threat that China is. I mean, look, they just launched a new stealth fighter that looks exactly like ours because they stole the technology. The Chinese Navy is now larger than the U.S. Navy. They've launched more into space than the rest of the world combined. This is, and listen, don't take it from me as a China hawk or others. Listen to President Xi's speeches when he talks about replacing the American dream of freedom and liberty with the China dream. Openly talks about it. And that's the goal on their end.
So the House has passed an increase in the individual payments from $600 to $2,000. The president is calling for the Senate to do the same. Speaking of the senators, Loeffler and Perdue are in agreement. Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley. There are a lot of prominent Republicans who agree with a lot of prominent socialists like Senator Sanders with giving, increasing the payments to direct payments from $600 to $2,000. I want to say to you, Congressman, that I understand that there is an immense amount of misery and suffering for millions of Americans because of this virus, and because China lied to us for months and protected themselves from the ramifications of it. I live in downtown Jacksonville, Florida. My neighbor on the first floor is a restaurant owner, Greg, who never thought he'd have to make the decision of whether or not he could keep or fire someone because of this. I get the pain.
Right.
But the talk about these direct payments, it twists my stomach because we're talking about a lot of money. And I just know that there are a lot of people who don't need this money, and the fraud stories are out there and all of that. I want the conversation, Congressman, to be shifted to opening up like we did in Florida and like what happened in Georgia in late April. And there aren't spikes and our hospitals aren't overrun, and we're not falling off a cliff like California is. Where are you on the direct payments, and what are you? I assume you're in agreement with me that the conversation needs to shift to opening up smart and safely.
No, absolutely. And I voted against the bill, the $2,000 standalone bill that came through the House. And here's why. It didn't do what the president asked. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there. I'm getting a lot of calls, when we voted against the president. No, what the president asked for is for cuts in pork in the big government funding bill in order to then better fund the stimulus, right? And what Pelosi put forward, of course, what Bernie and AOC are all cheering for is just more spending, no cuts. And so had there been an offset, had there been cuts, and then some additional stimulus, I would have considered it differently. That's not what Pelosi put forward. So I voted against that. But to your point, there are good provisions in this round of stimulus that gives businesses another bite at the apple. The Paycheck Protection Program puts a few more restrictions on there to get at fraud. It lowers the size of the business. And also you have to prove that you actually had losses. You're not just getting free money. But on the direct stimulus payments, my concern was that to your point, it would have gone to every federal worker that has been taking a paycheck this entire time. It would have gone to my congressional staff who are working hard and great people, but they've been getting paid. I mean, it just goes to a vast majority of people who may not need it rather than being targeted to those who don't. And I would have liked to have seen even more into the Paycheck Protection Program to help these businesses that are being crushed, particularly in Democratic blue states, where they're being forced to shut down again and again and again for no reason, not following the science. So, that's where I ended up on it. But to be clear, what the president called for was a cut in pork to then pay for additional stimulus. And back to your point on China, where this all comes around, the biggest weapon they have against us isn't necessarily missiles or tanks or planes. It's our debt. And they actively plan on, by 2028, just around the corner, when we're supposed to go completely insolvent and off a fiscal cliff as a country, that's when they're going to make their big moves militarily, diplomatically, and economically around the world. It's built into their strategy, and they love that Listen, we've gone from our budget was 1.4 trillion. We've spent 6 trillion already this year. It's just not. It's not sustainable, and we are putting our foot on the gas of going off that cliff.
We know that Andrew Yang made the centerpiece of his presidential election run universal basic income. I made the point earlier in this program, Congressman, that while there are people hurting by no fault of their own, and as you point out, that pain is being compounded by just horrific political leadership in states from California to New York. If we're talking about sending thousands of dollars to people. I had a caller, Benny, who here in Florida, he said he's a federal employee. He doesn't need the money. And like you said, he would have been eligible for it. This conversation changes the relationship between the people and our government. And as you again point out, if we are faced with 2 losses in this Senate race, we will have a political leadership in Washington led by socialist Democrats who will want to advance that thinking, which I think a lot of Americans, whether they want to or not, are being softened to accept universal basic income.
Yep. No, that's absolutely right. And then just look who will be running the country. We talk, you just mentioned, we talk a lot about California and New York, whether how they vote, how they've dealt with the corona, how they just squash individual liberty. They don't trust business owners or individuals to make their own decisions. It has to be made by government. Well, guess who will be running our entire national government? Yeah. Kamala Harris, Senator from California, Nancy Pelosi, Congresswoman from California, and Chuck Schumer, Senator from New York. So all the states, where people are fleeing in droves to get out of there because of horrible governance, is exactly, they'll take those same methodologies and make them mandatory, put it into law, and make it national. And again, that's what's at stake with 2 Senate seats in Georgia. So Republicans out there, I hear your frustration, but those election laws that we're so frustrated with, or those tactics that the Democrats have used, will be put into law. And when they stack the Supreme Court, they won't be overturned. Right. So please vote for the sake of our country.
Congressman, it is truly always a pleasure. You are one of the good guys, and I say that as a man who worked under the tutelage of Peter Schweitzer, and I investigated a lot of the bad guys in government, and you're not one of them. Happy New Year to you. I'd love to talk to you again and hopefully celebrate the victories in Georgia.
All right, God bless, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.